Hey, I'm going to see if this works. I'm recording from New Orleans in the backyard of my daughter-in-law under this absolutely breathtaking, magnificent 250-year-old oak. I know I've made a big deal about it in my shorts, but this thing is utterly incredible. I'll show it to you. It's gigantic. It spreads over 80 feet across the yard. It's just staggering how glorious and grand this thing is. So, anyway, yeah, you'd rather look at that than me, that's for sure. But I get to talk to you and share some information with you, and the oak just gets to provide a shade and beauty and food. So, I don't know which is more important. I'm going to give you some first impressions of this book by Michael Heiser, The Unseen Realm. I had a very dear and good friend send me a copy. And this was well over a year ago, and I just haven't gotten around to reading it. And I'm on vacation, and I'm reading it now. And it's really good. I can't help it. I like this kind of close, detailed, linguistic and exegetical type studies of the biblical record and trying to understand what the meaning is of the Old and the New Testaments. Sorry, I've kind of been sneezing. It's really, really windy. You can hear the nightingales singing up in the trees. I love how loud those little birds are. We don't have anything like that at home, but this Unseen Realm is very interesting. Now, Michael Heiser had a discussion, I should say. They call it a debate, but it's more of a discussion with David Bockavoy, when David Bockavoy was an active Mormon, on this idea of the Council of the Gods, and each one of their points of view was published in the Farms Review of Books. I can't remember which volume. I don't have them with me on vacation, obviously. And as I finish this book, I'm about halfway through the book now, and I wanted to give you my first impression, and I'll finish reading it in the next couple of days, and then I'll do a second impression of it. I would highly encourage you to read it if this is the kind of study, detailed, linguistic, etymological, historical, and in context study of the Bible that you like to do. I would strongly encourage you to get this book. Interestingly, in reading through this first half, I would say that if I had been a Mormon apologist reading this book, I would be quite excited about some things, especially his analysis of the Council of the Gods. Now, he did mail me, when he was alive, he did mail me his doctoral dissertation. I got to know him. I talked back and forth with him a few times on the email and all. I told him how much I enjoyed his discussion with David Bockavoy, and he said, "Oh, yeah, that was a fun discussion. David was a gentleman. He gave me the last word. I was going to give him the last word." So, typical Bockavoy, right? So, I hope this wind doesn't goof us up too much, sound-wise. I don't think it should. If it does, I apologize, but I'm choosing to be outside under this fabulous oak, and we're watering the backyard back here, back there. Yeah, you can see it right there. Woohoo! Anyway, so as an apologist, I would have gotten excited about some of Heiser's information on the Council of the Gods, because now he was an evangelical Christian. He was a Christian, and he was absolutely adamant there was a Council of the Gods. And this is very Joseph Smith Mormonism type sounding theology, right? And it's fun to see his interpretation of this council as opposed to how Mormons interpret the Council of the Gods. There are differences, very remarkably interesting. Perhaps someday I'll do a detailed analysis of that. I have come to understand through talking about Dr. Michael Heiser with other people that there are some Christians who are very upset with him, who did not like what he was doing. He became a hearsayologist because, of course, Heiser did think outside the box, the English translation of the Bible box. He said, you don't get it in the English. And I can't help it. I have to agree with him there. The context of the Old Testament is not going to be the early Christian church fathers or the New Testament. The problem with that is we read later materials, our own theologies, Mormons included, especially Mormons, back onto the Old Testament and say, see, our doctrines are there. The Council of the Gods, as understood using the context of the Hebraic background, does not conform to what Joseph Smith said that was. It's very interesting. It certainly did not conform to what the evangelical Christians had always been taught. Most of them had never even heard about it until Heiser came along. There are a lot of Christians who have said Heiser is the real deal, and I would agree with that. He is remarkable to read, very fun, very enlightening. So it's kind of a smorgasbord. Some Christians will like him, some Christians won't. Some Mormons will like him. Most Christians won't even bother to read him because they don't even bother to read their own scholarly literature, and that's all good anyway. Those who do love to get into the intellectual deep end of the linguistics, the etymology, and the archaeological historical contexts, discovering this Council of the Gods, those Mormons will find much in Heiser's book that is interesting. The part I want to talk about that really struck me the strongest at this point, and I said I was halfway, not quite, close. I'm up to chapter 19. I've read the first 18 chapters for the last 2 days. Was his idea of the two Yahwehs. And this was quite frankly remarkable. It's not something that Christians were used to. It's not something that Mormons are going to agree to. And yet through his usage of the Hebrew, the underlying nature of the Hebrew, I can see how he gets two Yahwehs. And this did, in fact, I do have Alan Segal's The Two Powers in Heaven. In later rabbinical Judaism, this became a gigantic argument in Judaism on the two different divine powers in heaven. And he discusses and shows through various interpretations of the Garden of Eden, of the Abrahamic covenant, of the Tower of Babel, of the calling of Samuel, of the calling of Jeremiah, of a very interesting discussion of Ezekiel chapter 28, tying it back to Genesis 3. Heiser shows how this theme of two different Yahwehs, one invisible in heaven, another one who came down and appeared as an embodied man to so many different people through time. His context of the Genesis chapter 6, the Nephilim, the giants, was quite interesting. And I'll probably do a separate video on that because, you know, that's a big whoop-de-doo chapter for all the sensationalistic stuff. I have yet to see Heiser's material made into a video from someone who was not Michael Heiser discussing that. Maybe I'll do that this week also. His two Yahwehs is remarkable because of how he ties it into this interesting theme that this is a precursor. Oh, Moses and the burning bush with the angel of Yahweh. Very interesting because Margaret Barker has that big study on the angel. And Geeson, I do believe his name was Geeson, also had another enormous, like 490 pages study on the angelic and messianic aspects of Yahweh. Angel morphology in the Old Testament, where an angel of Yahweh, whom was also considered divine because the name, the Hashem, Yahweh, the tetragrammaton, that resided in the angel, and therefore that made that angel divine, he could speak as Yahweh, even though he wasn't Yahweh. And I'm well aware I'm mispronouncing the name. It's all good. Nobody knows what it was pronounced like except Leonore Leet in her book on the Kabbalah. And I'll do a video on that when I get back home. So this theme of the two Yahwehs is a precursor. It is an indication that the ancient Israelites did understand that God could be more than one person. And so is this a build up to the Trinity? Now, Heiser appears to me to be trying to take it into that direction. I think it's quite remarkable how he gives the indication that the Yahweh in heaven is certainly involved in the earthly affairs. And there are times when the Yahweh comes to earth and appears as a man. For instance, the three men at the tent door of Abraham, two of them trot off to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, and Abraham argues with Yahweh. He knows that Yahweh because Yahweh had discussed things with Abraham earlier before. This whole discussion is quite remarkable because Heiser's making sense in a way that I had never before seen. And of course, you won't see this approach through the Mormon interpretive lens any more than the Mormon interpretive lens is going to see Heiser's approach. And Heiser does not see the Mormon approach. So this is what makes this so fun. Various serious scholars can read the same materials and come up with very interesting yet differing interpretations, differing meanings, differing theologies, and differing reasons of their historical interpretation. What is the Old Testament about? Heiser demonstrates Deuteronomy 32, 8, and 9. The allotting of the nations to the various Elohim, which in the Ugaritic texts and the Canaanitish pantheon of the gods, the head god El, the patriarch, the grand patriarch, he is the one that is the model for the old man in the silver beard and the long hair sitting on his throne doing nothing except presiding. It is the Canaanite pantheon of El with his 70 sons. It is these sons, this is the worldview, is how Heiser says. It is these sons who are allotted all of the different nations of the world. Yahweh is reserved for Israel. Or I should say, Israel is reserved for Yahweh. Be that as it may, that is the basis for the entire context of the rest of the Old Testament is this, say, argument, perhaps battle, war. It did come to war several times. And he ties Psalm 82 and Psalm 89 into this, where the Elohim are told by Yahweh that you have not done good with your allotments, and therefore you are going to die like men even. I mean, that is such a remarkable, shocking theological statement in the Psalms. The whole Old Testament is this context of Yahweh fighting the other deities and their nations for superiority. And it does bring into the New Testament picture of Jesus, who was understood to be Yahweh, Yahweh in the flesh, is how Jesus is understood by Heiser. That's how he interprets that. I think this whole thing is, quite frankly, stunning, interesting, and remarkable, because I've studied this. This used to be my very, very favorite topic as a Mormon apologist. I have dozens upon dozens of articles and books on this topic, the Great Council of the Gods. Heiser's book is yet another edition that gives me yet a different flavor, a new angle, a different type of a twist, a more interesting context than some of the other contexts I've studied, with the intent of demonstrating the truth of Mormonism, and therefore I can recognize now how my interpretation of those same scriptures that Heiser is using took a Mormon slant, and I also now recognize how Heiser, and it's just natural, it's not a criticism, it's an observation, how Heiser puts a Christian slant onto it. It's all perfectly natural. I get it. I understand. The Jewish slant, favoring the Christian one. Or if you're Mormon, it'll favor the Mormon one, etc. Fun discussion. Really eye-opening, expanding stuff. I'm going to finish this text. What is today? Tuesday, May 7th. I'll probably finish it this week, and then I'll do a follow-up on it. But yeah, I would encourage you really seriously. The Unseen Realm by Michael Heiser. Terrific book. Get it, read it, enjoy it. It's written very, very crisp, clear, and easy. And it's scholarly, but not overly scholarly. He also does give you access to a website that is seriously scholarly. I have not looked onto that yet. I will in time. For now, I'm just enjoying myself in this book. So there is my first impression of Michael Heiser, my friend Michael Heiser, who just recently died a year ago, of his book. And I would say, bravo, very interesting, well done, truly eye-opening, fun stuff. Go get the book and read it. And in the meantime, I'll catch up to you as I can, but I'm going to go back to vacationing. Hasta la vista, baby.